I'm Derek Eyring. I've been in the real estate business for over 3 decades. I'm an entrepreneur at heart, and I'm always paying attention to real estate trends, industry innovators, and business influencers.
I'm Alan Smith. For over 25 years, I've helped buyers and sellers with their real estate needs. Join us on this podcast. Let's talk about strategies to help you play this real estate game to win.
Join us as we search out the latest trends, hot topics, red flags, and deal breakers in every episode of Market Movers. Right, welcome to episode 2 of Market Movers podcast, and we're pleased to welcome Howard Chung here, the one and only.
The one and only, Howard Chung. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah. Actually, there's a lot of Howard Chungs. I've Googled myself, and there's a lot of Howard Chungs, surprisingly.
Well, you're our Howard Chung.
Yeah. So I'm your Howard Chung, sure.
Yeah, and just a little background. So, thank you for coming. We're lucky to have you because you have experience in all realms of real estate as an owner, as an agent, and you're the VP of the affiliate offices at John L. Scott. So you get to go around and see all of the brokers and talk to them and see what's going on, right?
Absolutely, and for a little while, I even took a step outside of the broker chat. I was in title and escrow as well.
That's right.
And I also have had some startups, which I'm still involved with. I'm entrepreneur at heart.
Yeah.
So I definitely appreciate all the changes that are happening in the industry, technology changes, consumer behavior changes, and I think so much of it is the mindset and psychology. And so I happen to be married to an organizational psychologist.
Oh, wow.
So I get a lot of the insights in terms of the behaviors of people and organizations. So it's just a lot of fun.
Yeah, that's so give us your origin story. How did Howard, maybe not from birth, but how did Howard decide real estate's the thing for me to do, and what did those first few years look like for you?
Yeah, so it's the classic case, which, there's very few people who decide, hey, I'm going to become a realtor when I grow up, right? So, I was a first generation immigrant, so there was always kind of like this, demand, whether it's forced or not, on me that, okay, you can be a doctor, lawyer, or engineer. Those are your 3 choices. That there's a lot of that kind of immigration story. I really love business, the business side of things. I went to the University of Washington, and so I decided to, hey, what if I became an attorney with a business kind of component to it? And so that was going to be my goal. I watched a show called LA Law, which maybe you guys remember.
Yeah,
I love that show. And so I was thinking like, okay, I'll be an attorney. And I'm so glad I'm not an attorney. But ultimately what happened is while I was in college, I took, it was a year abroad. I actually met my wife abroad in Israel of all places.
Oh, wow.
And so we decided to get married right after college. And that led us to Boston, where she was going to graduate school. And so I needed a job. So I saw the big now hiring sign in front of it's basically right between Harvard and Cambridge Squares, on Mass Ave. And there was a Century 21 that said now hiring. I walked in. I said, hey, what's it take to become a real estate agent? How much money can I make? And they're like, oh, a sharp guy like you're going to make, $80,000 your first year. I'm like, this is awesome. This is back in 1994.
Oh, wow.
So I was just like, okay, well, let's do it. And sure enough, that first year, I made $88,000, as a real estate agent, just doing what they told me to do. The market was pretty good. And I was like, 23 at the time, didn't know anybody locally. But again, you just like knock on doors and, have a little bit of thick skin and there you went. But then the second year I made over 6 figures. And the third year, now I was dialed in. I went to an intensive 7-week program. Okay, and this is like, for all the agents out there listening, I went to an intensive program where by the end of that 7 weeks, I was the #1 agent. They even said, if you can make it through these 7 weeks, you'll be the top agent in your office. And so there was an accountability system. There was all these systems in place. You guys maybe remember it was the Floyd Wickman Sweat Hogs.
Yeah.
So that was the program. This was before the Buffini and the Ferry and some of the other strategies, ninja ideas today.
Yeah.
But I was so confident in my ability to get a listing appointment anytime I wanted to by that point, and that's going to make all the difference, right? So I did really well selling real estate, but I hated the hours, right? Like many of us hate hours when we're working from morning till midnight. I mean, that's basically what it was, and it was just like, hey, the money's good, reached all my financial goals. But in those first 3 years, I was like, I've got to take a step back. Do I really want to continue to do this the way that I've been doing it? So I stepped away. Actually, we moved back to Seattle. I took about a year off, and then my parents were in the restaurant business, and so I was like kind of helping them do that. And I decided, no, I like the helping of clients, actually. I love that portion. I just didn't like all the weekend hours and how I was kind of like always feeling ragged. And so I just said, okay, if I can have operational systems, I went to another all-day seminar where they're just talking about systems and time management. That's when I fell in love with time management solutions. And then I was just like, oh, okay, if I can work Monday through Thursday and take Friday, Saturday, and Sunday off, I'll be pretty happy. So then my goal entering back into the business was I need to get one listing appointment every single week by Friday, right? And so I would work Monday through Thursday, and I reach my financial goals again by just working smarter Monday through Thursday. So that was my key. And I had team members early days, right, where I said, hey, open houses, you're going to handle open houses, you're going to handle clients for me on the weekends. And so that's kind of how I, in essence, had a pseudo team, not probably traditional teams as we think of them today.
Yeah.
But then through that process, then I said, hey, well, I can teach this stuff. Loved teaching, then eventually went up, started my own brokerage, and then eventually became VP General Scott.
So you were ahead of the team curve before teams were really a thing. You were already figuring out ways to maximize your time,
Yeah.
so that you could do what you wanted to do, which is enjoy your weekends.
Absolutely, and I think you have to have again right systems, some right just a lot of it was handshake kind of deals, which are still happening today.
Sure.
It was just systematizing it enough where if you're going to do showings for me, if you're going to do open houses for me, I will just pay you cash, right? But I'll pay you cash at closing. And so so like from a financial perspective, I just have a lot of good systems in place, and I think that was like my mom being in the restaurant business. She was really operational, and so she had all of these organizational systems down, and so I think I learned a lot from just observing her and watching how she did things. And so obviously I'm an entrepreneur, but a lot of people who are strong on the creative entrepreneurial side, you have to have some really strong operational sides, right?
Right.
And that's where it's like we've got to be extremely mindful when it comes to operations, processes, the COO portion of the business. And so if you can't do it yourself, and I think a lot of people take that excuse like, oh, I'm not good at that. No, you can be good at it. You're just not taking enough time on it. And we do have to, understand ourselves well enough to be like, okay, where am I going to still own the business, and still be strong in that area? But of course, knowing that the business is coming from the business development side. So always that balance, right, between CEO and COO.
Yeah, yeah.
It's funny that what you just said. That's what I really like when you come to our offices. You're positive, but you don't sugarcoat it, right? The reality is the reality, and you talk about that, which I really appreciate. So we always get kind of the straight scoop. Howard, you're like the guy that's like says the things that sometimes I want to say, right? Like, you guys aren't doing this enough, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And so with all these backgrounds combined, are there some things that you just sort of are noticing about our industry that maybe people should be more aware of?
Well, I think part of it, right, especially as we have these changes and these cycles, obviously, right, everybody's going through these real estate cycles. Some of the data that we have to consider, of course, is, boy, when the overall market is off by 20% or up to 40% oftentimes, then you have to do a correlation. Well, if the market's off by that much, how much is my personal market off? And so if it's along the same line, oh, my business is off by 40%, 40% means that's usually 100% of your profit. Most people do not have, that much margin left, right? Because they still have to pay for the operating of the business and all the expenses in general. So it's just like, what are you living off of, right? Unless you take a second job of some kind, in which case then you're really not helping yourself or your clients for that matter. So you've got to really think through, oh boy, if the overall business is off, I got to ensure my market share is actually growing. So number one, I've got to maintain 100% of my personal market share, which a lot of people are not. And I've got to kind of be able to take more of the other pie, right? Other people's market share by putting myself out there more. So there's got to be a much more specific focus on that business development strategy. And I think that's where, in a good market like the COVID years, for example, where, oh my gosh, just people are left and right, wanting to buy houses, I'm showing. And you know what? In markets like that, it's great where you can focus on profit. You don't have to worry, honestly, as much on the business development side because the business is falling in your lap, right? And when you're doing deals, you get more referrals typically as a result just because of the activity that's happening. But then when the business completely shifts from that position, we've got to have new behaviors.
Right.
And unfortunately, that's kind of where we've got to say, oh, I've got to displace myself from my current rhythms, routines. I've got to, have more rituals that actually can put me down a path of success. And one of the kind of little acronyms I always like to use is or the ideas is you don't want to work like a dog, right? You want to be God of your business. Okay, so it's the same letters, right? G-O-D or D-O-G. And in markets like this, or the really successful people, you will focus always on getting business. It doesn't take up most of the day, actually, the getting business portion.
Right.
In fact, most of the day should be spent on actually doing the business, okay? The actual showings, the actual listing presentations, listing appointments. That's the D portion. But that, you gotta prioritize the G, the getting the business, okay? The O is operating the business or owning the business. So I want to be like God in control of all things of my business, right? I'm the CEO, I'm the COO. First and foremost, do I need to fire the VP of sales? Or the chief revenue officer? And that you're the same person, right?
You're that
and
person,
generally
yeah.
speaking, you have to fire yourself.
Right.
You also have to fire your CMO, who's doing a terrible job marketing.
Right.
right? So it's just like, okay, so my VP of sales, my CMO, my chief marketing officer, you're not doing your job. You're not staying in touch with what's happening in the industry and the business and all those kind of things. So fire yourself and then rehire yourself with a new skill set. Right? So that's being godlike and owning the business. And then, of course, you still have to do the business. Again, listing appointments and buyer appointments and all of that. That rhythm will always be there, but must prioritize first getting business and owning the business.
It's almost like if your business is off 40%, is your work effort off 40%? Because sometimes it's easy to catch yourself in that mode too, or I'm coasting. I'm no longer pushing myself to learn new things.
Yeah.
So that's kind of what I'm getting from that, what you just said.
You know what? Just to be fair to real estate brokers, and leaders, and you guys, like all of us, right? It's kind of like, we came up out of some really crazy years of the real estate market,
sure,
right?
yeah.
So it was already hot, and then you had these COVID years where it was just like, oh my gosh, who knew, right, what it would be? And so then you're kind of exhausted, but you're also successful and exhausted. Mm-hmm. And then what happens is all of a sudden it took such a fast turn, right?
Right.
We're so exhausted and like learning new stuff, implementing new behaviors. That's also exhausting. That's tiring.
For sure.
And you don't know
For
where to
sure.
start. And so the lack of creativity or concentration, it's understandable. But at this stage of the game, I mean, where we are today, in summer of 2024, if we don't have a game plan, which a lot of people don't, right? Or they might think that they have a game plan, but it's not really a game plan,
Right.
because nothing's actually being executed. It's just, it's more of just like that New Year's resolution idea, or just like kind of that stretch goal. Not bad to have. I mean, you want to have those, but there's really no execution plan. And that's really what we got to talk about these
Or
days.
the old plan from 1998 that you're still churning today may not be the best plan to work on. You've seen a lot of real estate agents and brokers over the years. What do you think are some of the most common traits of the successful ones? You've obviously known some very successful brokers.
Yeah.
What would you say they have in common? What are some of their habits and actions?
Great. Well, that's it. The habits and actions, isn't it? And I think the top producers, they tend to get up a little earlier.
Wait a minute, I want to write my own schedule.
You mean voluntarily?
They tend
Okay.
to know when they get up what they're going to do kind of consistently. There's a particular back to that routine, that rhythm in the morning that, and hopefully it starts off with something positive, like they've got a plan for the day,
Gotcha.
right? I mean, there's things in the calendar. It's not just a free for all, because, the classic idea, like, oh, I'll do, like if there's a block of time that says, business development, and it's in there day over day over day and nothing's happening, it's too general. It's not specific enough. So we've got to know exactly who am I going to talk to today? What's the purpose? What's the design? What's the intent of that engagement? What should be the end result? Am I going to get a listing appointment? And at a very simple level, that 7-week program that I talked about, it was you come into the office 3 days a week at 9 a.m., make phone calls until you got 3 listing appointments every time. So that was 9 listing appointments per week. understanding that a certain percentage of those will convert and others will not.
Right.
Right. And so, what most agents, right, they don't have that kind of goal. Or in leadership, we don't have recruiting goals or specific productivity goals. That's really specific. I got to have a listing appointment every single, like at least one a week. Right. One a week with hopefully a pretty high conversion rate is going to lead me to a certain number of listing inventory, and every listing, of course, is going to convert to a certain number of buyers I'm going to get as a result of that, right? Buyer sales.
Right.
So I would just say at a very simple level, I got to get a listing appointment every single week. No matter what it takes, I've got to get a listing appointment. That means more conversations. So the top producers, back to your question, I think they have more of the more specific goals on a day-to-day, week-to-week basis than probably the less successful people.
And they're aware of their goals. They're constantly monitoring those and probably focusing on those a little bit more.
Yeah,
too.
it wasn't the classic once a year stretch goal. I'd like to make this amount of money. I don't know how I'm going to get there. Again, that's a good exercise to do. I'm not discounting that. But then it has to be followed up with day-to-day action plans. It's kind of like, you know what? I'm going to be healthier in 2024. Okay. Well, how are you going to achieve that? Well, I'm going to join a gym membership. Okay. Well, which days of the week, right? What time are you going to go? What does that look like? So it's all those routines and behaviors. I mean, it's so much of that we just talked about.
Yeah.
Habits and routines and behaviors.
Good. That makes perfect sense.
Yeah, absolutely. I was just thinking, so you first started and your goal was to be a top producer, and you made $80,000.
Actually, let me take that back. I wasn't to be a top producer.
Okay.
My number one goal was to pay off all of my wife's school debt.
Oh, okay.
That was really tangible.
Which means you needed to be a top producer.
Which means I had to make, a lot of money just
Yeah.
to not be in the red, right? Because there's so much school debt nowadays still, and she was doing, again, she's an organizational psychologist, but she's got like she has 3 master's degrees and a PhD.
Oh, wow.
So there was a lot of education, a lot higher, expenses on that. But I wanted to make sure that after at least her first degree, we were in the black, right? And plus we wanted to save up for family and a house and all those kinds of things. So there were very tangible goals. It was not so much to be a top producer.
Okay.
In fact, I would say a lot of top producers, their goals are similar. It wasn't necessarily to be a top producer. Once you're a top producer, you want to maintain top producer status, and you've got some competitive goals, right, among your other peers, right? But it's generally speaking a very tangible, visual goal that they can touch, smell, taste. I mean, all those things, right? They're living and breathing it. But anyways, you had a question there.
No, yeah. So $80,000 in 1994 was probably quite a few more deals. I mean, nowadays, $80,000 is two, 3 deals.
2, 3 deals. That's right.
Yeah,
that's
so
right.
that's a lot of deals, right?
Yes.
Now, knowing what you know now,
Yeah.
if you were just starting out,
Yeah.
your first 30 days in the business, what would that look like?
Yeah, so there's an advantage for people who are in fact starting out because today there are in fact so many ways to make yourself look like an expert even though you aren't necessarily an expert yet.
Sure.
I think that's one of the biggest challenges with newer people because if you're a client, if you're a buyer or seller, you want the confidence of working with somebody with some credibility, and that usually means years of experience. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean you've got years of experience, therefore I'm going to have a better experience, right?
Right.
Although a lot of times it does mean that because we've just been through it. People who've been in the business for a long time, there are absolutely things that we pick up, but we also pick up bad habits along with good habits, right? And so just because you've been in the business for many, many years does not mean you're a better negotiator. That for sure.
For sure.
I can guarantee it doesn't make you a better listing agent when it comes to marketing a house. In fact, I've seen a lot of real estate brokers who've been in the business for many years. They still put into the MLS. They might get professional photos, right? They might run the same copy and paste copy, or maybe they're using ChatGPT nowadays. But then that's the limit, especially in a market that demands more, or the homes are sitting a little longer depending on price category, the size, square foot, and all that. There's actually no strategy. So in fact, if you're a new agent, you can actually do things that are much more creative. You can actually create content that buyers and consumers, people who aren't on the market, might actually be interested in looking at, thereby even getting more business opportunities and actually doing the seller a better job. They might be doing a boost ad, targeting specific communities and areas where the most likely buyer might actually come from, might even be out of state, for example, and yet experienced agents might not know how to do that. So if you're a brand new agent, number one, in terms of the digital footprint, in terms of your presence online, I think that is critical because it's not just about lead generation anymore. It's about something called demand generation. Meaning, Lead generation is just like, oh, I'm curious about buying a house, so that's a lead, right? I don't know if it's going to be soon or down the road, but I'm curious about buying a house. I don't care who it is as long as they're trustworthy and they seem pretty good. That's lead generation. The person doesn't matter. Demand generation, it's about the individual. It's about the influencer. Oh, you seem to be an expert on ADUs. You seem to be an expert on North Tacoma specifically because you grew up there, you went to high school there, you know about the neighborhoods and the restaurants and all these amazing things, and you're talking it up and you're talking about real estate and what's happening in the market and home values and the demands consumer is asking for. As a brand new agent, create content, right? Number one, create content, but what are you creating content on? Your hyper-local expertise. On top of that, preview listings. Know the inventory, what's happening in the market. So when you are all of a sudden, like you've like seen all the listings, like everything that's on the market, driven by the pendings and the solds, I mean, you actually get a really good sense of what's happening in the market, what inventory is available. And just by you previewing, you don't even have to have a buyer, but if you can preview all the existing inventory, keep notes and be like, boy, I really like this house. In fact, I bet it'll sell in the next 20 days, right? 10 days because it looks so good, it's priced right. As a new agent, you have the ability to do that. Now go find a buyer for it because you're excited about the house.
Right.
Or if you think it's overpriced, boy, if they had a $30,000 price reduction, then it'd be really good. Then be excited about listings and just start having conversations with people as you're out and about. Day to day, your own sphere of influence, new people that you're meeting. There's so many fun ways because we have to create energy on the things that we're really excited about. And I know every agent out there, whether you're a new experience, the two of you, you know, when you take a look at a property that's really exciting, like one that you would want to live in, you have a certain level of energy.
Right.
And I swear it's just like, shoot, I wish this was my listing. I hope I can sell this property. I gotta go find a buyer for this thing, right? That's when just deals happen because we are in the right mindset. You know, so we have to think not only about time management, but energy management. What are we excited about? So first 30 days, hyperlocal content, take lots of B-roll of the areas, know how to do light video editing, download CapCut as a free editing tool, know how to, create reels, of course, on Instagram. I mean, that's where you're going to create some influence, but also on YouTube Shorts, YouTube itself, become an expert, right? Be known, be searchable for that kind of content. So the first 30 days, I would just be kind of an expert in terms of content creation, and then I'm really a matchmaker between properties I'm excited about, communities I'm excited about, and potential buyers that are out there who might be interested in that. So that's what I would focus.
So you're talking about full contact real estate, not just hiding behind a computer screen all day and thinking that you're working, because it's really easy to hide on the MLS all day long and look at pretty houses that way, but you got to get out and open the doors and really
it's just
get
like a
feel
Zoom
for it.
meeting. Like we can have a Zoom meeting or a phone call, it's all good, but when we're face to face,
Yeah.
a whole new level of energy and trust and other things are happening. So I know gas is expensive, maybe get an electric car or a hybrid, whatever you need, or you go on tour together, but go preview listings.
Right.
And don't just preview the new listings, preview the listings that have been on the market for a while.
Right.
Preview the listings that are in the top 1%, right? Like super expensive. Maybe it's been sitting there for a little while. Preview every listing possible. Again, I still have a classic clipboard. Write notes on the back of it.
Right.
Boy, if this were my listing, who would I be targeting if this were my listing? Already think like a top producing listing agent. So you're already setting yourself up for success. And you're already gonna find like, boy, this listing agent, they didn't do this, this, and this, and this. I would do that. Boy, I wish I could even tell the seller that, but I can't, right? That's against the MLS rules. But if that listing goes canceled or expired, I'm gonna go tell them, I've seen your property, I've got notes on it. Can I go, can I share these notes with you? Are you still interested in selling the house? Because I'm excited about the house, and that's the type of information that I always want to share.
Especially if a listing goes off market for some reason.
Oh, yeah.
And you happen to have toured that home.
Yes.
It's an easy conversation to have with a seller and say, out of curiosity, what do you think caused the home not to sell?
And part of that expertise, especially if you're a newer broker and you want to establish that validation, even to your own sphere of influence, when I'm out there putting on content, hey, this is Howard Chung with John Scott Real Estate. I just toured 3 of the best listings here in North Tacoma this week. One I found was an amazing deal at $500,000. So if you're an investor, first-time home buyer, there's buy-down programs. If you're curious about it, or you know somebody who's actually interested in moving to North Tacoma, ping me and I'll actually go ahead and send that listing to you because I really think it's one of the best listings. I wish I had a buyer for it right now. So if you know somebody who's interested in North Tacoma, let me, I'm just doing off the cuff
Right,
type of thing
right,
here.
right.
But my energy and like
Yeah.
my excitement of this particular listing, and I can't mention the specific listing, obviously, right, in a video like that for social media for MLS rules violation. But also, there's a curiosity. Oh, what listing is he talking about? I
Right.
want North Tacoma. I'm curious about that one as
Right.
well. But now I'm also putting myself out there as a North Tacoma specialist in this particular example, right?
Yeah.
And clearly, my excitement about it, especially if I have B-roll of the community of North Tacoma, that I additionally add into that, website. There's amazing editors who can actually even help you with things like that, right? So, like I would say, invest in the right places. I mean, when you're previewing, you're also investing just with gas. So make sure that you understand it's an investment, but you got to know your inventory. It's kind of like if you go to a car dealership and you're interested in buying a car, and you know more about the car than the salesperson knows about the car.
right.
It's kind of like, I've done more research than you, and
Yeah.
you work here,
Yeah.
right? So you need to be like really knowing your areas, your community, the mortgage products more so than ever before. I mean, it's so just crucial. House Bill 1337, which we talked about earlier today, ADUs, all these kind of things. Become known as an expert very quickly online, and you're going to get more opportunities.
And you said something real critical there too. Enthusiasm is contagious.
Sure
You know,
is.
people pick up on that. Regardless of your personality style,
Yeah.
your enthusiasm always comes through for something. So
I think oftentimes like people are a little like hesitant in terms of like video because I don't want to sell myself.
Right. There's a lot of
Oh, come on. I don't want to sell myself. That's awkward. Don't sell yourself. Sell product. Sell the awesome listings that you just previewed, right? Like talk about, like the ones that you've been taking, talk about your favorite neighborhoods. So you don't have to sell yourself. You need to sell like why it's awesome to live even in your own neighborhood, like where you personally live if you like that neighborhood, right? Hopefully you do. So talk about all the amazing things, that are happening, the events. And so I think there's just a good opportunity there. But okay, all that being said, you can create as much content as you want and for the first 30 days, and if it does not end up in a listing appointment on a week-to-week basis, stop doing it.
that. Yeah. I was
Whatever
gonna go
it
there.
takes, you
Yeah.
got to get that listing appointment.
Yeah, I think young folks especially, they're great at creating content, but you have to actually get out there and meet humans.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
you got to do some open houses. You got
I'll actually push back. Young
Okay.
people, old people, doesn't matter. Creating content, it's not an age thing. I think there's this myth that some
True.
people
Yeah.
like know how to do that. Actually, I think it's about strategy and what you're excited about. So
Yeah.
I think it's just a matter of kind of getting outside of our normal scope of life.
Okay.
And being like, oh, I'm really excited about this. I would love to talk about this, right? It's
Absolutely.
kind of like if we just ask anyone a question at a dinner party. Actually, this happens sometimes at dinner parties. What's your favorite restaurant? You're eating food and you're talking about other people's food or other
Right.
restaurant experiences you've had, right? But when we get excited about something as simple as that, like your favorite restaurant, oh my goodness, like please stop talking your favorite Netflix show. So again, get excited about communities, neighborhoods, things to do with real estate products, availability. That's where that enthusiasm comes from. Not about selling yourself, right?
right.
Yeah, it used to be really hard as a new broker to sort of get your way into the market. You didn't have all of these tools available. You just kind of had to hang out and hope something good happened, right? 20, 30 years ago.
Yeah.
But now you can do all of this stuff. You could get up to speed on the market. You could become a sort of an expert on the market, and that's sort of how you overcome the experienced broker, is you know more about what's happening, all the pending solds and actives. But beyond that, that was all you had.
Yeah. I think, if there's a secondary piece, which is also about content creation, but you can do content creation for one person, okay?
Right.
Content creation for one person, that's your neighbor. Or where the office just sold the property, you can almost do some natural assumptive guarantees. If our office sold the property, okay, chances are the neighbors, and there was a sold sign, right, on the sign, but then that sold sign goes down, there's no flyers, and most neighbors are curious about what the house sold for because they saw what it was asking for generally.
Right.
Most of them do not look up what it sold for,
Right.
but there's a curiosity on there, right? So what I mean content creation for one is take the list or take what the house sold for, have your name badge, knock on the door of the neighbor, right? And just say, hey, I'm Howard Chung with John Scott Real Estate. Our office just sold the house next door or just down the street. Most neighbors are curious. I just want to let you know what the house sold for. It actually went for 107% of the asking price. So it actually went above the asking price even in this market. Oh, really? Yeah, and I would do it on a Friday, Saturday when people are happier, maybe in the afternoon time, so timing of things matter. Yeah, so just want to give you that information. Hey, would it be okay to let you know what other houses are selling for when they come on the market? Most neighbors are generally curious. Sure. What's your email address?
Right.
I just made an introduction. Hey, I'm also giving all my clients a little market update in terms of how much their home has actually increased in 2024. Most people don't realize that it's gone up significantly. Would you like one of those as well? Since I'm doing it for all my other clients as well also. That would be great. What does that entail? You can invite me into the house if you like, or you don't have to. I can just give you a general market update specifically based on some of the statistics. But a lot of people don't know that you can actually add an ADU to your property, which would increase the value quite a bit on your house as well. But and I also know some of the limbs are touching against your roof, which you want to get trimmed. I've got actually somebody who can help you do that. But that way you get the pests and off the roof and all that type of thing. So you're already building value. This is again content for one. Right? I'm not talking about video. I'm just talking about literally knocking on a door, but understanding that everybody is curious about real estate, the value of their homes, so when you are somebody, who's a professional and there's right context, like you just sold a house, your office sold the house, so here's the sold information, that's always going to go a long way. So I would always just say, again, back to that listing appointment, you're having those one-on-one conversations with your public.
You're talking about having these conversations, and my first thought is, I can tell you've done this before. Right? But that's what you want people to know, right? That your experience, you've gone through this. You know what to,
the whole, when, again, back when I started in the early days, I didn't know anybody. I had to knock on doors. And then when I owned a brokerage, I knocked on doors with agents, right?
Okay.
When I had the funniest day was I had a group of newer agents in my car, right? We're previewing houses. I saw for sale sign. I stopped the car. Everybody got nervous. Like, oh my God, he's going to make us stop at the for sale by owner sign, right? It's like,
Was that for sale by owner?
Well, for sale by owner, right?
Gotcha. Okay.
So people are always afraid of not knowing what to say.
Right.
Okay? So, people say, oh, people are afraid of rejection. Actually, I don't know if people are afraid of rejection. They don't know what to say. You know what? It's really easy to find out what to say, especially now with AI. You can literally ask AI immediately, I'm a real estate agent. I'm talking to a for sale by owner. I'm talking to a neighbor. What are some topics I should talk? Honestly, it will give you scripts. It's amazing. Of course, you can look up stuff on YouTube and other people doing it, but that's at our fingertips all the time now. So when you kind of remove the barrier of I don't know what to say and that fear, and you've practiced it once or twice, it's so much fun to get to know your community. Right, and actually have some context, and then it becomes fun, and I'm providing a value. So I would say these are a lot of things in the first 30 days, right? But there's so many different options you can actually have.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
Well, and you mentioned your brokerage experience there. From the brokerage level, what do you see has been trending? You've probably seen a lot of changes at the brokerage level.
Yeah.
What do you think some success stories or trends or traits, and maybe management styles? What are you seeing today that seems to be getting traction with brokers?
Great question. So now I'm talking to you a little bit on the leadership side, right? People who own a real estate firm, maybe they're also still selling some real estate, but you're still generating revenue from your real estate firm, right? From the production of agents. And I think for a long time, it really has been kind of like, oh, well, I got to have a certain number of agents who succeed in order for me to make money. And a large percentage, I'm just going to accept the fact that they don't do any business.
Right.
Yeah, but you hired them. You did.
Yeah.
You did allow them to be associated with your firm. And I would say today, if you have a bunch of unmotivated, non-producing agents, there's just more harm that you're doing to your own firm, to your own brand, to the culture of the office. Isn't it better to be a lean, mean fighting machine where there's a culture of productivity, a culture of fun, a culture of, accountability? So you start to have to think, okay, and you know what, that doesn't mean necessarily just cutting everybody off and just letting them go. It means having one-on-one conversations and seeing what the needs are individually of those brokers, because it might just be some coaching. It might be you as a coach, or it might be getting them a coach, or figuring out a coaching process. A lot of times when it comes to coaching, it's accountability that's the need. And so we need to create cultures of accountability. Okay, and a lot of times that can be done through peers. In fact, it's not always best when it comes to a management,
Right.
I don't want my manager or boss.
Yeah.
In fact, that's why I joined real estate. I didn't like my last boss.
I don't want a
they
boss.
were a jerk.
Yeah.
I don't want one of those.
There
right?
seems to be some hesitancy with managers.
Well, there might be.
Yeah.
The flip side is they might actually want you as a coach. So
Yeah.
that's why you have to
Yeah.
know individually what's your style, what's your personality, what's my personality. Do you want me as a coach? Maybe, but everybody ought to have a peer coach, right? A group of 3 or
Yeah.
4 friends that they meet with on a regular basis. Okay, they don't have to be best of friends, but at least colleagues. And we're going to hold one another accountable. What activities are you working on, right? And so when it comes to really the future of real estate, it's us being able to have better gatherings, right? Like a lot of real estate offices are kind of quiet during the week. They should be regularly meeting, right? And there's sales meetings. I'm not taking anything away from sales meetings, but beyond the sales meeting, individual agents should feel connected, right? We all want belonging and culture and fun and those kind of things. So who are the 2 or 3 people? And again, it's not talking about team necessarily, like where you're financially sharing and all that kind of stuff, but who can I meet with on a regular basis where this is what I'm working on. Oh, this is what you're working on. Let's make sure we're both getting this done together. And let's check in on each other next week. If somebody doesn't show up to a meeting, somebody's giving me a call. Where are you? What's going on?
Yeah.
Right, and this isn't a Zoom meeting. This is a physical meeting because we're
Right.
supposed to go on tour together. I've already got these scheduled. Like it's my week to schedule the tours. Where are you? Right, and then if you find, oh, well, they are consistently the no-show, or they're negative, or they're just not right for the fit culture of that peer, then maybe that's the conversation with leadership. Maybe this isn't the right fit for them.
Right.
You know, so those are all like strategies and conversations. So productivity of agents, understanding the culture needs. That is just critical, right? First and foremost. When it comes to just the straight operational side of things, we've got all these amazing spaces that are just empty all the time. How can we rethink about the space, right? Can it be an education place? Can it be a place where HOAs meet on a regular basis? Can school boards meet here on a regular basis? How can I make this more open to the community? I mean, I would love for people like HOAs to meet here all the time. I'm gonna host. We're also gonna have a little sponsored portion by the host where we're talking about mortgages or about real estate options, right? Just for 5 minutes, you know? I remember when I did a geographic farm, I showed up to the HOA, right? And also keep in mind, 70% of all the listings were one agent, right? And so I just
Wow.
was looking for a percentage of it. Within 18 months, I took 100% of that agent's market share.
Oh, wow.
I took it all over.
That's a pretty good return.
And all I did was show up at the HOA meetings, introduce myself, had really good cookies, not bad cookies.
Good
they
cookies.
were excellent cookies, meaning they were talking about the cookies. I went to a specialty bakery store,
Wow.
got
Okay.
excellent cookies. Like, where'd you get these? These are amazing. So like all of a sudden, yeah. And then like, you know, I remember like, you know, the maintenance guy got sick. I put get well cards, you know, just provided by me. Little things like that, but actually showing care. So there's so many simple things that we can do. So when it comes to space, let's reframe how our spaces can be. You've got a beautiful space here. How can we have more events, parties? You know, what nonprofits, what
Right.
feel good? You know, maybe there's a church group, or maybe there's like the churches that meet at schools where they don't actually have like an office, for example, and they need that kind of thing. So get to know your community. Your agents have community members that be like, oh, you know, our space is available. Would you be interested in using it in the evening? That's what I think space can do. So make your spaces more vibrant. Have Wii night, right? Or Nintendo Switch night. You got the amazing TVs,
Yeah.
and you know, so like have game nights, have poker nights, right? Have everything, you know, under the sun, so that there's like an event at least once a week. Wine nights, but that's creating culture. More people to come in, and I'll tell you this: you will attract more agents as a result
Yeah.
of that. So that's part of your recruiting strategy. So it's all combined. And of course, you know, additional revenue, like maybe there's a mortgage component, you know, there's a property management component. You know, you also need to be experts at investing. So I would say, you know, the more classes you're able to do and facilitate, have online content just like this that you're doing, you know, just provide more and more services that way. So we really have to think outside that box.
Like a restaurant that has a buzz about it. You drive by, there's a lot of cars in the parking lot.
There you
You
go.
think, you know, the food must be pretty good. The restaurant down the street that has no cars in the parking lot, you're like, maybe not.
Exactly. So I think for owners right now, we really have to reframe our position as leaders to be like, okay, this isn't working clearly. My space isn't working. I've got to redo the approach. What's the investment I need to make in terms of time, effort, energy? Sometimes the agents are your number one source. Go ask them first. Like, hey, would you be the culture ambassador? Would you create an event per month? And then you ask several of those agents to do that, and it's just like, oh my gosh, just like that overnight.
Right.
We've got multiple events happening. There's like the office energy is changing. There's productivity happening. So I think that is just such a missing piece right now in the post-COVID world. How do we bring culture back, people back into the offices for what intent, what design, what purpose? Art of the Gathering. I think I mentioned that book earlier today also. Just talking about the intentionality of gathering places and, just thinking about our offices in that way.
Terrific. That's a great answer. And, we've been sort of moving in that direction for a long time. You have to sort of diversify to survive.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
And so these are important things. And I think it's actually better, to have that mix. The more I like the action, right? That's what I kind of talk about here is the more people, the more action, the more people doing things, the better, right?
Yeah.
It's your restaurant analogy.
Yeah, well, it's a business seminar I went to years and years ago. I wish I could remember the company that held this and came up and spoke to us, because I'd love to give them credit. But they had a miracle question that you could ask yourself. And that question was, when it came to leadership, was, what's it like having me for a leader? And if you can ask yourself that question, that works in all areas of your life, by the way. What's it like having me as a spouse? What's it like having me as a parent? What's it like having me as a sibling, right? If you can ask yourself that question, it forces the responsibility on you. And maybe there's something that you're doing in this area of your life that's kind of sabotaging what your efforts are, and you don't even know it because you haven't really thought about it. So it's a great way to look at it too, I think.
Love that.
So if you're out there and I don't remember who you are, thanks, I remember. I'm the guy that remembered it.
Yeah.
All right, I'm sure you get this big question. If you had a crystal ball all the time, probably, if you had a crystal ball, what would you see happening in the next couple of years in the real estate market in the Pacific Northwest in particular?
Yeah, so whenever you do the crystal ball, right, people are terrible about predicting the future. Like, who could have anticipated, the past 5 years or the last 1 year with the what's called the NAR settlement, all these other conversations that could be happening, right? The prediction. Although some people probably say that was coming from a long time ago, whatever. But the point is, predicting the future is really difficult, but assessing what's happened in the recent past or the long-term past, that's really easy. And so we can basically look at history in terms of the growth of Pierce County, right? Or of King County or Washington State or Western Washington in terms of the demand of people moving into the area. So there's some obvious things, what are those continuing trends for the most part? What are continuing trends as far as home appreciation? Always the message is the greater Seattle area always follows San Francisco in terms of home values and things of that nature. There's always those kind of trends that we can kind of start to anticipate and think about, other movements that are happening in terms of just home building, availability. I think what's happened recently with the ADUs and the middle housing bill, that's going to be pretty significant in terms of the real estate and culture. I think people are going to continue to want to own real estate if at all possible, but what that looks like might change. There's conversations of the fractional ownership, and there's all these other things that's been always kind of there, and you see elements of it. But investors will always want to invest. First-time home buyers will always want to buy first-time homes.
Right.
Maybe the funds are going to continue to be help from the parents, for the most part. So in that regard, there's not that many changes necessarily, but one thing for sure is the way that trust is established online. That's already that whole influencer, real estate agents become influencers, this demand generation that I just talked about versus lead generation. I think that is something that is not going to change. The AI part, obviously, that's not going to change. That's in fact just going to get better and better. And so how is that going to be relevant to real estate? The real estate agents who can really use demand generation, content marketing to connect, not just with people they don't know, but even the people that they know, to be reminded more and more than ever before. SEO, how that's also evolving and changing constantly. I think those will continue to impact our industry significantly. The consolidation of offices will probably happen because it's hard just to be a single owner operation. You've been a team for a long time already. So more and more team efforts, but strengths by having like the ability to do podcasts, right? Knowing which mic and camera and like which editing software and having the resources to do these kind of things. Knowing that if I hire a new agent, I'm going to do podcasts with them and interview them rather than just do a headshot of them. I mean, all that kind of stuff is going to matter as far as just the success of agents. So I would say overall, industry-wise, we're just going to continue to see as much, more kind of quote-unquote consumer-friendly methods as far as connecting homes with them with the right experts in place. So I do believe that ongoing, we hear that every single year, consumers want a hyper-local expert that they can trust to walk them through the buying and the selling process. So you better show it that way, because if I check out your website right now or Google you and nothing shows up, even though you were recommended, I might think twice. You got no Google reviews, no YouTube reviews, your website is not reflective of who you are and where you work and any of your expertise. I think that's a challenge. So we got to keep that portion up.
And that's the kind of thing that you say to our brokers when you come around that I love hearing, because it's reality, right?
Yeah.
And sometimes they need to hear it from other folks.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
You don't want to be the toaster on online shopping that has no stars. You don't want to be that toaster.
Yeah. Might be a great toaster. Who knows?
And this is a kind of a side question, but I know you're a reader.
Yeah.
You read a lot.
Yeah.
Give us a couple great books that you're reading now or have
Wow.
recently read that you would recommend we all take advantage of.
Okay, so like, I mean, there's always like, it always seems like the most recent one is like, at your
Right.
attention, right? So like, again, the most, a couple of the most recent ones that most of the books are coming from a psychologist point of view, but these are all, business friendly, not overly academic, but absolutely, this Love 2.0 and Humble Inquiry. So Barbara Fredrickson wrote 2.0, Love 2.0, and then Edgar Schein wrote Humble Inquiry. But it's our approach to how we just communicate with people, right? And plus you'll live longer and have better quality of life, and you'll get more business as a result of it. So just our approach, our engagement with people, understanding how to do that well, rather than just sharing information. I want to share life and be genuinely curious, and I want that to come across authentic, because I want to care for my community and individual people, and I want business as a result of it, and that's reciprocity. That's from one of my probably top books, influenced by Robert Cialdini. He's got a second book called Persuasion, which also goes into the psychology of why people make decisions the way that they do. But we need to understand things like, if I'm going to be a psychological influencer and I want people to work with me, I do have to understand things like scarcity and reciprocity and liking, not to manipulate, right? But to really understand, in fact, you can actually start to understand more of that book so that you don't manipulate, but understand the power of some of the things like social proof and all the other factors why people make decisions, life decisions sometimes that they do when it comes to buying and selling homes. So I would say influence is right up there. Another one, how many I've mentioned so far? 3. Getting Things Done by David Allen. People who are just a mess. Their desk is a mess. Their CRM, their contact management system is a mess. Their email is a mess. So like, just back to that operational side, we've got to spend some time, organizing our lives, organizing our communication, our day, our email, our inbox, our action items. You cannot live in email. You have to have a project management solution. You have to have a CRM solution. So understanding some of those things. So I think Getting Things Done, it's a oldie but a goodie. Classics like 2-minute rule, stop doing list, and everything else comes out of that. But so I would say like those are some of the kind of best ones, to start with anyway.
Great takeaways.
Yeah.
Appreciate
Awesome,
that. You've always got great references.
And some great information, and we just really appreciate having you. It is a lot to take in.
Sure.
As always, I don't know how you retain all this. You and Alan are like, you wind up.
If you could work on your enthusiasm a
Yeah,
little more.
Yeah. I'm working on it.
That would be great. So any parting advice for us? Any
I would just
Parting
leave,
thoughts?
leave with one. Actually, I'll give another book, right? So, Deep Work by Cal Newport. He's written a bunch of great stuff, digital minimalism, which almost goes contrary to what I was saying about being online, because it's also talking about like taking a break from a lot of social media and all
Yeah.
that on that one. But the one that I'm referencing is called Deep Work. And what that is just talking about the fact that is we're not spending enough time, long enough time working on projects. So if you're working on your business, it takes time. It takes a certain amount of clock hours just to get licensed, right? The pre-licensing course or whatever. So I'm telling you, or telling us, we got to have like blocks of 5 hours at a time to work on things like how to figure out CRM or understanding CapCut or creating that first video. So whatever you're working on, don't give it 30 minutes or an hour or watch a 20-minute YouTube video or a 5-minute one and be done. Or go to a sales meeting and think, oh yeah, I got it, I understand it.
Right.
I mean, like anything that is worth doing and understanding, going deep, you've got to spend have a work retreat. Do a work retreat for yourself, right? Have them regularly. If you're completely changing up the way that you're doing business, go away for a weekend with no distractions and just work on that one item. Like starting by cleaning up your database, getting all the data in there as far as like when, where, and why they would move next, for example. What's the home value? What's the equity? What's their current life situation? When was the last time I talked to them? What level of relationship? I've kind of categorized them into different, like buckets in terms of what they're interested in, all that kind of stuff. So I would say have a deep work retreat. That's basically what I would recommend as far as a parting gift.
You mentioned earlier the Floyd Wickman Sweat
Sweat
Hogs
Hogs.
program. Floyd had a great saying. His saying was that anything worth doing is worth doing poorly until you get it right. And that's exactly it. Just spend the time, the effort, digging into things and figuring it out. It'll make a difference. So,
Yeah.
Thanks so much for doing this.
You're welcome.
Thank you so
Absolutely.
much,
It's been a
Howard.
pleasure. Thanks for having me on.
All right.